I still remember the sound before I felt the pain. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp, a sick little crack of bone against tooth that cut through the air. My head snapped back with a force that made my vision blur for a second. Then came the taste, hot and metallic, flooding my mouth. My dad's face was so close I could see the tiny broken veins in his nose, the angry twitch in his jaw. "You think you get to keep your paycheck when your sister needs it?" he growled. His breath was a nasty mix of old coffee and cigarettes. My knees felt weak, like the strings holding me up had been cut, and my hand flew to my mouth. Warm, sticky blood immediately seeped through my fingers, dripping onto the clean kitchen floor. I felt the gap instantly, a smooth, horrible void where my front tooth should have been. My tongue darted into the space, confirming the nightmare. It was gone. I wanted to speak, to scream, to explain that I had already paid half of my sister Melissa's rent last month. I'd bought her groceries twice, just last week. I'd covered her phone bill so it wouldn't get shut off. But before a single word could fight its way through the blood and shock, my mom's voice sliced through the silence. It was sharp and, to my horror, almost happy. "Parasites should learn to obey," she said. She was smiling, a thin, satisfied smile like she'd just won a prize. Her eyes scanned me from my head to my feet, her expression full of disgust, as if I were a piece of trash someone had tracked into her perfect house. On the living room couch, my sister Melissa was lounging, her eyes glued to her phone, barely bothering to glance in my direction. "Don't get blood on the floor," she mumbled, her thumb swiping across the screen. "It's gross." I tried to take a deep breath to steady the pounding in my head, but all I could hear was my dad's voice echoing with menace. "You will transfer your entire salary to my account by tonight, or I will make sure you can't work at all." Melissa smirked, still not looking up from her screen. "He has a point," she said to my mom, her voice bored. "You can't just let parasites walk around thinking they have rights." They both laughed then, a private, cruel sound that made my stomach turn. My blood continued to drip onto the white kitchen tile, making tiny red splashes that looked like ugly flowers. I stumbled toward the sink, my hand reaching for the roll of paper towels on the counter, but my mom snatched it away before I could touch it. "That's for the guests," she said, her voice flat and cold. Defeated, I grabbed the dirty rag from under the sink. It smelled of mildew and old grease, and the metallic taste in my mouth mixed with the rotten smell made me want to throw up. "You think I'm joking?" my dad said, taking a step closer. His large body blocked the light, casting a shadow that swallowed me whole. His voice dropped to a low, dangerous whisper. "I will call your boss right now. I'll tell him you've been stealing from the company. Let's see how fast you lose that precious job of yours." I stared at him through blurry, tear-filled eyes. The throbbing pain in my mouth was nothing compared to the crushing humiliation that was clawing at my chest. Melissa let out another little laugh, amused by the drama. "Make sure you tell him he's unstable, too," she added cheerfully. "Nobody wants to hire a drama queen." I pressed the smelly rag to my bleeding mouth and forced myself to stand up straight, even though my entire body was trembling uncontrollably. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something, to throw a plate against the wall, to make them feel even a tiny fraction of the pain they had just caused me. But I knew better. They loved reactions. They fed on my tears and my anger. They wanted me to break, to fall to my knees and beg for their forgiveness. So I didn't. Instead, I looked right into my dad's cold eyes and said quietly, my voice shaking only a little, "You'll regret this." His eyes narrowed and a vein in his temple began to pulse. "You're already regretting it," he shot back, tapping the side of his own perfect tooth to mock me. My mom chuckled, shaking her head as if I were a stubborn little kid refusing to eat her vegetables. "You've always thought you were smarter than us," she said with a sneer, "but you're nothing without your family. You should remember that." Melissa finally put her phone down, her face serious for the first time. "Actually, let's just make this easy," she said, standing up. Just give me your banking password. I'll transfer the money myself." I stared at her, completely stunned. It was so bold, so entitled that it was almost hard to believe. "You've lost your mind," I whispered. Her face hardened into an ugly mask. "No, you've lost your place in this family, and it's about to get a lot worse for you if you keep talking back." I walked out of the kitchen slowly, holding my hand over my aching jaw. My dad called after me, his voice full of triumph. "Don't be late with that transfer." The sound of their shared laughter followed me all the way down the hallway, every single note feeling like a nail being hammered into my spine. I locked myself in my bedroom and slid down to the floor, my back against the door. The mirror on my dresser showed me my reflection, a swollen lip, a dark gap where my tooth should have been, and eyes red and puffy with a rage so deep it burned. I gently touched the empty space in my mouth and felt something new and hard take root inside me. It wasn't just pain or sadness anymore. It was a quiet, cold, burning clarity. For years, they had taken everything from me, my money, my time, my self-respect, and they had called it family duty. For years, I had foolishly told myself that if I just gave them enough, if I just worked hard enough, they would finally see my worth. They would finally love me. But tonight, with the taste of my own blood in my mouth and my tooth shattered on the kitchen floor, I finally understood. They would never stop. They would drain me dry and then kick my empty shell to the curb. They would never stop, not unless I made them. And I wasn't going to make them pay with fists or screaming. That was their way, not mine. I was going to make them choke on something much bigger, something they couldn't just spit out and forget. I picked up my phone, my fingers still trembling, and opened a blank note. One by one, I began to type the first pieces of a plan I had never dared to even imagine before. My hands were still shaking, but this time it wasn't from fear. I didn't sleep at all that night. The throbbing in my jaw became a steady beat that kept time with every angry, vengeful idea that raced through my head. I lay in the dark, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, replaying every time they had called me a leech, a burden, a mistake. By the time the sun started to rise, the physical pain in my mouth was just background noise. The only thing I could feel was the sharp electric focus in my mind. When I walked into the kitchen the next morning, they were all there. My dad was sitting at the table, sipping his coffee. Melissa was in her silk robe scrolling endlessly on her phone, and my mom was at the stove frying eggs, humming as if nothing had happened. "Well," my dad said, not even bothering to look up from his newspaper, "did the transfer go through yet?" I didn't answer him. I just set my bag on the counter, pulled out my car keys, and started walking toward the door. "You're not walking out of here without paying up," he barked, his voice rising. I turned just enough to meet his eyes, my expression unreadable. "You'll get what's coming to you," I said calmly. He let out a short, harsh laugh like I had just told the world's funniest joke. My mom smirked into the frying pan. "Make sure you tell she's unstable, too." Trent was right. The project was entirely mine. If it worked, it would be worth more than my entire annual salary. And I knew that if my parents ever found out about it, they would find a way to take every last penny. So that very afternoon, instead of submitting it as company property, I filed for the intellectual property rights myself, under my own name, completely separate from my job. That was step one. Step two was more personal. I started digging into their lives. Every time my parents bragged to their friends about their spotless reputation in our town, I would just smile. I knew better. I knew about the unpaid debts they never mentioned, the charity events they lied about donating to, the shady deals my dad had made. I knew the way Melissa would borrow credit cards from her friends and never pay them back. It was all there, hidden in old receipts, forgotten emails, and even a few photos I had kept over the years. All I had to do was connect the dots and put it all together. At home, they thought my new silence meant I was scared and broken. That made them bolder, sloppier. Melissa would wave her new shopping bags in my face and say, "See, this is what your money is for. Good girl." My mom would loudly mention my empty bank account at the dinner table like it was a funny story. My dad would pat my shoulder with a fake gentleness and whisper, "Better get used to it, parasite." I played along. I even transferred them a little bit of money here and there, just enough to keep them fat and happy, confident that I was still completely under their thumb. Meanwhile, I was quietly building a cage they couldn't see. By the third week, the plan was complete. It wasn't just about exposing them. That was too simple. It was about taking away the one thing they valued more than my money, their control and their precious social image. I was going to make them watch as every door they thought they owned slammed shut in their faces. It started with Melissa. She had an exclusive fashion event coming up, her golden ticket to the modeling contract she had been chasing for years. She had been bragging about it nonstop. I made one phone call and sent one email with some very interesting information about her spending habits. I didn't want to ruin the event itself. No, I wanted her to go. I wanted her to get all dressed up, arrive at the door, and find out what I had arranged. Then came my parents. They were hosting a big dinner for the local business association, a night they had been planning for months, calling it proof that they were pillars of the community. It was the perfect stage, not for them, but for me. Because by the time that night came, their own words, their own cruelty, and every dirty little secret they had hidden would be sitting quietly in the hands of the very people they were so desperate to impress. When I looked at myself in the mirror that morning, I saw the same missing tooth. But my eyes didn't belong to the girl who took their abuse anymore. They belonged to someone who had stopped obeying. And my family was about to learn what happens when a parasite finally bites back. The night of the business association dinner, the house smelled of expensive food and cheap desperation. My mom wore pearls, my dad wore a suit he couldn't really afford, and Melissa floated around in a designer dress like she was a queen. They didn't even look at me when I came down the stairs dressed in a simple black dress. "You're not invited," my mom said sharply, without turning her head from the mirror. I smiled, a real smile this time. I wouldn't miss it for the world. My dad's jaw tightened, but he didn't push it. They thought I had come to be a servant or to act nice in front of their important friends. That was the beauty of it. By the time the guests started arriving, the dining room sparkled, the silverware was polished, and the glasses were lined up like crystal soldiers. I stayed near the edge of the room, silent, watching. Every handshake my dad gave was a performance. Every compliment my mom gave out was an act. Melissa was busy live streaming her outfit to her followers, posing and pouting for her phone. Then I saw him, Mr. Keller, the president of the association, a man whose approval my dad had been chasing for years. And in his hand, I saw the thick, sealed envelope I had mailed 2 days earlier. Inside it was everything. The bills from contractors my parents never paid, the proof that they had moved money from charity fundraisers into Melissa's personal bank account. There were even audio recordings I had secretly made of them bragging about manipulating their neighbors for favors. And just for a little extra flavor, a neat little note quoting my mother, "Parasites should learn to obey." Mr. Keller didn't approach them right away. No, he was smarter than that. He waited until every important guest was in the room, holding a drink and laughing, and then he walked straight up to my dad with that envelope. I watched his face change from smug and confident to pale and frozen in a matter of seconds. My mom leaned in, reading over his shoulder, and I saw her hand fly to her pearl necklace. Melissa stopped laughing mid-pose, glancing between them with confusion. The whole mood of the room shifted. Whispers started to spread like a virus. People who had been smiling at my parents minutes ago now stared at them with confusion and disgust. One woman actually took a step back from my mom, as if she might be contagious. My dad tried to laugh it off, to pretend it was a joke, but Mr. Keller's voice was clear and cold. "Your name doesn't belong on our board, Tom. Not after this." I moved before they could find me in the crowd. I slipped out through the side door and crossed the street to the little cafe where Trent was waiting for me. From the cafe window, we had the perfect view of the front of my house. Within 20 minutes, guests were leaving in groups, some not even bothering to say goodbye. Melissa came storming out first, her face blotchy and wet with tears. She had gotten a text message telling her that the fashion event was suddenly full. No more spots, not even for influencers with a growing following. Funny how that happened after her name started being connected to credit card fraud. Then my parents came out. My dad's tie was loose, his eyes darting around like a trapped animal looking for an escape. My mom's lipstick was smudged and she had taken off her pearls. They just stood there on the sidewalk alone, their happy buzz of their party completely gone. For the first time, they weren't the center of the room. They were just nothing. I stepped out of the cafe, letting the heels of my shoes click loudly on the pavement. When they saw me, my mom's mouth opened, but no words came out. My dad's voice was a broken whisper. "You." I held up my phone. A single picture filled the screen. My swollen face and broken tooth, taken the night he had knocked it out. Underneath it, I had typed one sentence. This is where it started. I didn't yell. I didn't have to. I just looked at them the way they had always looked at me, like they were worthless, like they weren't worth the air they breathed. Then I walked right past them, brushing Melissa's shoulder just enough to make her flinch away from me. By the time I turned the corner at the end of the street, I could hear my mom hissing something at my dad, her voice tight and desperate. It didn't matter what she said. Their perfect little world had cracked wide open, and the pieces were never going back together. They had built their lives on power and control, and now they had none. And every time they wondered how it all fell apart, they would remember the night they laughed in my face, and they would remember how the parasite they thought they owned had finally made them choke on their own ugly pride.